Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk to you guys about the Canon R5 and why it's still a good option in 2024, even with the Mark II coming out this year. Let's get into it. The R series came out around 2018, 2019, and the initial camera, the EOS R, was a revolutionary camera, especially coming from a DSLR camera, or a DSLR body, I should say. The ESOR was a very good camera. Then you had the R6, you also had the R3. These cameras were actually very good, but something about the R5 that really stood out that made all the other cameras just seem like they weren't the go-to option, and I'll talk about it. For one, the Canon R5 has 8K internal RAW. That's a very good option. I know a lot of people probably won't use 8K internal RAW, but there are those times where you might have a client just for that specific shot because you want to have high quality. For most uploads, even the 4K or the 1080p, uploading to social media, it'll do just fine. The quality is still good. It also has different formats that allows you to choose from which one would work best for your scenario. Now, outside of that, it also has great autofocus. It has a dual pixel autofocus, which allows you to catch onto your eye, catch onto an animal, catch onto a car. There's so many different functions within that autofocus that made the R5 a great option. The one thing that people really dislike, and I think that's a flaw with a lot of cameras, especially now that they're revolutionizing everything. When you disrupt the technology, there's always going to be a point where it takes you to a high, and there's going to be a point where it takes you to a low. And in this case, with the R5 was known to overheat, specifically when you used it in 4K scenarios where you use the HQ. With many updates, Canon allows you to alter the settings on your camera so that your camera can actually record continuously even while it's getting warm. Of course, it will give you an option, but it allows you to record for a longer period of time so that you can get all the content that you need. And that was a good thing. The average person nowadays uses some sort of external monitor, which allows you to record further than 30 minutes. And that's great, which is why some of the features that are coming out on the Canon R5 Mark II are still going to be usable, but it's great only if you don't have those external features. Now, I don't know what type of photographer or videographer you might be, but it just might not be the camera for you. Outside of that, this camera, when it first came out, it was around $4,000. I mean, now you can get one on the used market from 25, maybe even 3. It still retains its value, so that's very good. When it comes to the memory, this takes a CF Express Type B card. Now, these CF Express Type B cards are not cheap, but then again, they're not expensive either. So for what you're trying to do, this should actually be able to record your high quality videos. Especially if you want to do 120 frames per second, you'll need a CF Express Type B. The average person uses a regular SD card, and maybe 256 or maybe 512 will be good enough for you, but it'll probably be a V60 or a V90 card. Those cards work great with this system. Now, outside of the specs, what you're looking for in a body really depends on what your niche is. I mean, this camera can shoot sports. I personally wouldn't use this considering that there are other or better alternatives, but it can get away with shooting sports because it has, I believe, 20 frames per second if you use the electronic shutter. The R3 is probably the better option to use if you're gonna shoot sports. But if you're gonna shoot regular portraiture, or you're gonna use fashion, or you're gonna shoot cars, whether it be for video or photography, this will get the job done. Now, the lenses, of course, is another caveat because you have to actually get an adapter, which is not bad because nowadays, especially with all the alternative brands, the adapters run for anywhere from $99 to $199 so that you can still use your old EF glasses. Now, as you can see, I still use my EF glass. This is a 24 millimeter on this body, which is great. I've used this for car photography. I've used this for fashion shows. I've used this for landscape, just regular travel photography, and it has never let me down. The only other downside to this camera would be the battery. Now, if you're gonna shoot high quality video, you might need another battery. You might need to bring another battery with you on set. Although Canon does provide you with the LP-E6NH. These batteries are higher quality and they actually retain the energy a little bit longer for you to shoot your content. And I think that everyone should have at least 2 of these in their backpack if they're going out shooting content. It'll get you about 2 hours, so if you carry 2 of them, it's 4 hours. That's good for about half a day project if you're doing something like that with this camera. So, what makes you want to get another camera? Or shall I say, what makes you want to get the R5 Mark II? If you're coming from an older system, such as a 5D Mark III or 5D Mark II, even a 5D Mark IV, I would suggest getting the Canon R5 Mark II. And why? Because Canon has revolutionized cinema cameras, especially with the 5D Mark II. This was the first time that you can actually shoot RAW internally on a DSLR. This made every single person who had a camera want to become a cinematographer. And if you're a Canon shooter from way back when, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's Magic Lantern. Magic Lantern was a great software. It was a hack for the software that allowed you to get all these features, cinema features that you would get in a cinema camera, which now they have the EOS R5C, which gives you all those features and more. So Canon is still on the line with their cameras. Video specs, it still looks good with C-Log and C-Log 3. If those of you who are familiar with being creative with your content, using C-Log or using log footage is one of the best ways outside of RAW to get the best dynamic range out of your footage. I can understand that if you want to get the R5 Mark II, because I believe it comes with the Canon Log 2, which is only found in a couple of other cinema cameras made by Canon. Is this something that you can see yourself using in 2024 or even going beyond? Yes, I'd say this is still a valuable camera. It holds its weight among some of the other heavy hitters with Nikon and Sony, and it can still do everything that you need to do, both for video work and for stills. Now, 45 megapixels might seem a lot with the file size, but if you're the type of photographer that wants to crop in on your work, or if you want to blow things up, 45 megapixels is just right. It's about the sweet spot. And even before these 45 megapixel cameras, you're still getting away with it, shooting it on an 18 megapixel camera or even a 24 megapixel camera. So the more megapixels doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get the better shot. It's good to have it if you want to crop and resize, but you can still get away with it with older cameras. I plan on holding on to my Canon R5 for a while because it's still a great camera. It can last another 3 years, especially with all the technology. We haven't been uploading higher quality video to social medias that much, and I don't think there's really a need to actually go outside of it. Take a look into the Canon R5 if you're looking to get a used camera, something that'll hold its own, especially if you're starting out in photography. This is a great beginner photographer camera, and it's also a great videographer's camera. It's good for run and gun. You can rig it up, and it'll be just the camera for you. The Canon R5 is a great camera in 2024, regardless of what you need it for, in my opinion. Although there are some cases where you might be better off suited with another camera. Drop a comment, let me know if you plan on using the Canon R5 in 2024, or if you plan on upgrading to the Canon R5 Mark II. Until then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace. Oh, don't forget, stay creative.